So, welcome to our show, The Patriot Perspective. I'm so glad to be here with Ofer Adar. Ofer.
Likewise, I'm glad to see you.
And we have been attempting to start this podcast for quite some time now, and we now finally are here. So let's just quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Gregory Lykov. I'm currently the youngest nationally syndicated columnist in the country. I write regularly for Newsmax and Town Hall Media as a columnist, as well as contributing to the New York Post, The Hill, the Wall Street Journal, and dozens of other outlets. And how about you, Ofer?
Yeah, my name is Ofer Adar. I'm the host of the Thedi Mapping YouTube channel, wherein I cover the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. So I've amassed over 50,000 subscribers and millions of views.
Yeah, and combined, we have approximately millions upon millions of views between both of our platforms. So it's wonderful to join with Ofer Adar, one of the smartest people I know. And, today we're going to be discussing many issues, but I want to start off with discussing our personal experiences this week. So I actually attended the Turning Point Student Action Summit, which was an event hosted by Charlie Kirk in Tampa. And Ofer, unfortunately, he was not actually present, but he was there through Rumble. So, this event was huge. 7,000 students, dozens of speakers, every conservative you can ever imagine was there. And I wanted to start by asking you, Ofer, what your perspective of the event was through, virtual perspective, what you thought of the crowd and the speakers.
Absolutely. So there, of course, is a juxtaposition between watching the event in person and interacting with the politicians and influencers that were there and sitting back and watching it virtually. So I was able to get a holistic view of the cultural zeitgeist with the speakers and the reception that they received from the audience. I saw that there is now this sort of burgeoning populist movement that is best exemplified by people like Tucker Carlson that received the most support when they were speaking. So that was really notable. And I believe that's the direction that we're seeing the conservative movement going with Generation Z. People that are disaffected with the traditional two-party system and are trying to get into the Republican Party and influence it and shift it towards a more populist direction, trying to really dethrone the old guard that consists of Lindsey Graham types and Mitch McConnell types. And Turning Point Action is an amazing platform to actually give them the tools needed to unify, build up a popular base, and get into areas where they can wield power. So I want to ask you whether you sensed that sort of populist feeling in the air, and how did you feel talking to people like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, those sorts of people, and what sort of direction of the country are they viewing right now? How do they think about it?
Yeah, so I was privileged to interview all of these people, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, and I first want to start off by saying by far the most memorable event of the entire, organization, I mean, of the entire time I was in Tampa was when Charlie Kirk recognized my writing. It was really a surreal moment. He, recognized me from the emails I sent him and from the columns I have online. And it was wonderful to see that these people are really based in our conservative movement. They're there to bring the young population, people our age, into the conservative spectrum, and not only to change the perspective young people have in the entire conservative movement, but also to expand the base. And that is a big deal here because Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, they already have millions of dollars. They have no reason to be in politics. I don't believe any of them want to be politicians. What they want to do is to make an actual change. And this is what I saw. This is what I saw to be very interesting with them, to see 7,000 kids my age or slightly older than me all come together and form a basically wall against the liberals, the liberal agenda, the DEI movements that we have seen for the last 4 years, to form a wall between us and them. That was huge. That was the most successful part of this event. Not only that, but you mentioned something very interesting about Lindsey Graham. And I had the privilege of speaking with the person who's actually running against Lindsey Graham in the 2026 election. And yeah, 2026 election. And his name Andre. He is a wonderful, wonderful person. He used to be the lieutenant governor of South Carolina. Now he's running for the Senate spot. And he brought up a very good point that Republicans are done with these moderate Republicans who don't actually do anything like Dick Cheney, Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
Uh, we're done with these people. We want people who actually make change. And that's why we're moving to a more right-leaning Republican Party. That is what I find very interesting about this event. When we have speakers like Steve Bannon, who was himself a political prisoner, and the entire crowd was cheering for him. I found that very moving, as a Republican, because it means that the conservative base is really building up and is turning stronger than ever before. I wanted to ask you a question because, watching online, you listen to all of the speeches, I would assume. And I wanted to ask if there was any speech that stood out to you compared to the rest, whether it was Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, or anyone else.
Well, it has to be the one with Tucker because he is now sort of adding a corollary to previously agreed upon precepts that are widely sort of accepted within the conservative movement. He talked about how, as a party and as a movement, we need to focus on more than the culture war. We need to look at the cost of living and how that affects young people. That's, of course, the number one issue for people in our generation now, as they're trying to move out, trying to pay for student loans, trying to pay for a mortgage potentially. So that's really important, and we can't get lost in culture war issues, albeit they're very important. They still are something that we need to focus on because then people on the progressive spectrum, they're able to catch those voters. That's what we saw with Mamdani when he won the primary. So he was raising a very astute point and talking more generally about how the old guard of Republicans are dying out, how they're not popular. And everybody in the crowd, those 7,000 individuals, resonated with that. So that's showing the shift. And those people, those 7,000 people, including yourself, I would assume are going to go into higher education, study in degrees that are associated with politics. Some of them will become staffers for political campaigns and will enact change within the next 20, 30 years. So that's a really positive direction, and it's all being harnessed through Turning Point USA. So I wonder if you sort of sense that sort of energy within your colleagues that were there, because I wasn't there to see it myself.
Yeah.
And also expand on your sort of conversations with other prominent figures that we
Of
haven't
course.
mentioned yet. Like Noam, that's a good example.
Yeah. So you bring up a very good point. And when I was surrounded by these types of people, the messages I heard, I was there for press. So I had a press badge. I was basically able to enter wherever I wanted. I had several interviews on several different, news channels that were wonderful and, that requested interviews with me. But what I got when I spoke with everyone, I got a sense of, we're tired of this already. We're tired of being the radicals. We want to be the change now. And that's what Tucker Carlson was discussing. Tucker Carlson was not discussing, we have those Ben Shapiro's in the world. Ben Shapiro, by the way, I respect him. He used to be the youngest nationally syndicated columnist, and now I beat him by 1 year. I respect him dearly. But the issue with Ben Shapiro is, if you listen to his podcast, what does he talk about? He talks about LGBTQ politics. He talks
Very
about the
trite. It's very
yeah, he
trite.
talks about the books being banned in Florida. No one cares, to be honest. I don't think anyone cares. Republicans and Democrats. We're sick of this already. We need to
Yeah.
move on. We need to move to the more important issues. And that's what these young people gave me a sense of. That's why you bring up a good point with Christy Nome. I spoke with her. I for a few minutes had the chance to email her for a press interview, which hopefully will be coming soon. And when I spoke with her, we were not speaking about issues like LGBTQ politics or whether, if you're transgender, you should be able to get gender affirming care. I don't care about that. What we care about was immigration. We were speaking about border
Yeah.
control, we were speaking about, how to secure our country from invaders and illegal aliens. That's what we were speaking about. Actually, I'm going to criticize the conference. My main criticism for it was that there was too much attention spent on Jeffrey Epstein, on the Jeffrey Epstein files. Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, Megyn Kelly, all of them were focusing on the Jeffrey Epstein files, which I understand it was, big in the news. But again, this is another thing of like, why do we care? why is this the biggest thing in the world right now? This does not affect the most people. It is, of course, an issue. We, of course, want to know who was involved. I get that. And I think Trump gets that. I think everyone gets that. But we should not spend our entire agenda focusing on the Jeffrey Epstein files because there's much more important issues that are much more life-threatening than Jeffrey Epstein. That's what I think Trump is saying. And I wanted to get your thoughts because I know you think a little bit differently about it
Yeah.
than.
Look, what I'll say is first and foremost, you look at a list of the top priorities for people. Absolutely. Immigration up there, number one in Trump's voter base. And that's something that we need to push and pressure Trump on and know him as well. So I'm very happy that the big, beautiful bill passed and it's going to help jettison that. Besides that, you have healthcare, you have cost of living. Those are the most important issues. And actually, since the Epstein scandal, as we would refer to it, got really pushed into the mainstream, Trump's approval rating is marginally gone up. So it's
Yeah,
not something that necessarily is important to the vast majority of Americans, but it is important to Trump's core base that we see online. And I can say myself included within that amount because essentially the problem with the Epstein files and with the entire story is that it just shows it's a great example of the rots and the power that the political establishment, the intelligentsia, not just in the United States, but in multiple countries, had, and the way in which they were able to utilize their power in ways that are extremely insidious, included hundreds or potentially thousands of victims, and were able to cover it up for years upon years, regardless of administration, Republican or Democrats. So that's
yeah.
that's the reason why the base cares about it so much. And the fact that you had people like Patel and Bongino that were really pushing it on while they were not elected officials, and they said, "Yeah, we believe there's something more to it than we're seeing in public." That also did add fuel to the fire. So that's why people are so suspicious of the way in which it was coyly covered up and is only now being released after some sort of pressure with the grand jury request for the testimonies to be released. So, regardless of that fact, I do agree that yes, it should not be a primary focus. It should be something that is focused on concurrently with many other issues, including immigration and the economy, though. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder what you
And
think.
Ofer, I wanna ask you a follow-up question. Obviously not all of the files are being released, not
Yeah.
or not all of them are being asked to be released by Attorney General Pam Bondi. But I wanted to ask you why you think that the grand jury files, why should they be released? Because the entire essence of a grand jury
Yep.
file are just, thrown accusations. There's no proof behind it. That's what a grand jury, does. They
Mhm.
are charged with accusing, not with, prosecuting. So I wanted to ask you why you think those are so important to be released and why that should be a first move to, be released before the other Jeffrey Epstein files are.
Well, to be quite honest, I don't think much more is going to be released besides that. I feel like Trump, he understood there's pressure. He tested the waters by calling it the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, which is simply something that the base is not going to accept. They're not going to accept that it's a Democrat initiative because Democrats themselves are implicated in many of the Jeffrey Epstein files. So it just falls flat on its face upon arrival. So he's giving, I would assume, breadcrumbs to the base by releasing one component, but not everything. That's my view of it. To be
Yeah.
honest, if I were in charge, and there are constraints, I believe, because on the one hand, the Bush administrations, the first Trump administration, the Obama administration had so much time to tamper with evidence, remove evidence. Epstein himself was given opportunities the first time he was arrested and the second time he was arrested to move his computer files and many of his recordings to safe places that were never extracted. So I believe that probably the majority of the evidence that can implicate other people and himself is not even accessible to the FBI. That being
And
said, whatever
and
they, yeah,
just to butt in here,
yeah,
I know I just want to follow up on you. Why do you
sure.
think the specific, grand jury files, why are they being released? Because aren't those the exact files that would actually hurt innocent people? Because those are again just accusations. So that those are the exact things that would hurt innocent people.
Well, I would say that for the most part, if those files get released, which we don't even know if they will, I think they probably will, but they might not because the courts, for the most part, aren't privy to releasing them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a part of it as well. That maybe they're hoping it won't get released or that it will get drawn out. Probably for the most part, it will only focus on Epstein and Maxwell, who already were thrown under the bus because one of them was arrested in 2019 and the other one was convicted 2022.
Yeah.
So it could be a way of also sort of getting ahead of Maxwell because she wants to give additional testimony to the House now. And so maybe it's a way of just sort of getting ahead of her and releasing things that she already stated in the past in order to prevent her from saying anything new and salacious that could be targeted against prominent individuals. Maybe that's a part of the consideration. But if they were honest about trying to release the entire truth, then they would likely release every single file they had, not just in the FBI, but in the CIA, NSA, any intelligence agency. They would also release transcripts, not videos, but actual transcripts of what's seen in the thousands of hours of videos that Pam Bondi said were recorded of Epstein with children. So I believe that would be a more prudent way of going about it.
Yeah. And you bring up another good point with Maxwell. I mean, she is still being prosecuted. Her case is not over. She has much more, time to go. That's why not all the files can be released yet because
Yeah.
they're going to be used or supposedly going to be used to prosecute maybe Maxwell or maybe others. And when we think about that, that would mean that the Jeffrey Epstein case is not really over yet. So that there's no end. So obviously, I do believe that there's some sincere, some, validity to the point that we can't release all the files. I get that. But the question is, why are we releasing the exact file that would hurt innocent people, the grand jury testimony, which is literally for specific, just accusations? If you want to release a file that is more, that will hurt less innocent people, I would want to release, the court filings, everything like that, who actually accused Jeffrey Epstein and went through with it. Because we see people like Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz got falsely accused. That case, nothing came out of it. It was completely thrown out. There was
Yeah.
no evidence behind it. But with the grand jury testimony, you're going to have 30 different Alan Dershowitzes. So why are we specifically releasing that file? It's not like the conservative base even wants it. We want all the files. And that would give us a better picture of who actually was involved, who Jeffrey Epstein was associated with, and why they were associated with Jeffrey Epstein. I also wanted to bring up a good point that Alan Dershowitz made on his podcast recently. He
Mm.
said that, there's no list. There's no list of people who were
Yeah.
involved. That's pretty
No
obvious at this
way.
point. Anyone who claims there's a list is lying. What there is there's dozens of court filings. And in those court filings, there's people mentioned. Alan Dershowitz was one of them. Obviously, he was his lawyer. But other people who were mentioned were obviously definitely Bill Clinton. Obviously. I mean, everyone says that. Bill
Yeah.
Clinton was more associated with Jeffrey Epstein than probably any other politician there is. And even Donald Trump could have been mentioned. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprising if he would be mentioned.
Definitely.
However, you know, a mention does not go into an accusation. An accusation does not go into a conviction. That's what people have to understand. And most people don't. Most people don't understand that. That's very sad. So, Jeffrey Epstein, his entire case could hurt a lot of innocent people. I think we all understand that. But how do we move forward into making sure that innocent people are not being hurt, if those files are going to be released?
It would have to be a model of what Dershowitz did, honestly. And it's not going to be completely clean because there's going to be a lot of ambiguity about where you were in 2003, 2002, because that's when he was at his apex, essentially. And then I think it was 2002 when Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be very difficult to know for sure, but it's in the public's interest to know where celebrities and elected officials and other very important people were and whether or not they were associated with them. And then the right of reply will be for all those people to sort of rationalize it. So,
Hmm.
so it's not clean, but Dershowitz, to credit him, he was able to respond to the accusations. And eventually, Virginia Giuffre recanted her account of what happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was really substantial. But she's not the only person who accused him by any means. There were
Yeah.
40 other accusers in the first case in 2005 when he was arrested. And ever since, Pam Bondi said there are thousands of videos with thousands of victims potentially that were recorded. And we don't know if he downloaded it or if he did it in person. And that's a part of the ambiguity. She's not being really transparent about that. I would like to know whether he downloaded videos of those individuals or whether he was recorded with other powerful people doing something. Because there's no statute of limitations on those sort of crimes. If somebody else was there, a third party, that has to be prosecuted immediately.
I 100% agree with you, but the question that many people are going to be asking now is that, look, Alan Dershowitz, what he has been through was horrible. He got falsely accused from someone who never even faced any trial after that. She never got convicted of anything, and you can't get convicted if you falsely accuse someone because it's
You
technically not
should.
a
You should.
crime. Yeah. So to her, she's a she obviously got pressured by lawyers to accuse, but it ended up almost ruining Alan Dershowitz's life, and she walks away free from that. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that there should be any consequences for falsely accusing? Because obviously there's, Alan Dershowitz's side where he's the victim, but also if you falsely accuse someone who you genuinely thought actually committed that crime, you shouldn't obviously be prosecuted. So what should we do about this, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's something that we've seen a lot with the Me Too era, and something that
Oh my
was
God.
also mentioned a lot in the Diddy trial
Yeah.
is happening in parallel. So it's pretty funny. But absolutely, if there's enough evidence within the normal process to actually convict somebody, to prove that they lied about it, that should definitely be prosecuted. And that will also disincentivize in the future people from making false accusations. That much is clear. Now, the thing is, there are so many people that were accused besides Virginia Giuffre that I believe that people that want the files to be hidden, they're going to focus all their efforts on her in order to
Yeah.
discredit hundreds of people potentially. Because we have associates of Jeffrey Epstein that have never spoken on the record, have never been transparent, and we need to know what they were doing. The most obvious example is Les Wexner,
Yeah.
who literally gave power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein over his full estates, even though Jeffrey Epstein himself does not have any sort of experience in finance. So somehow, after 2 years of meeting him, he gave him full control over his estates, and we're just supposed to be okay with it because after he was convicted the first time, Les Wexner let him go. And there's so many other names within the mega group, as it's called, a powerful group of billionaires that were associated with him and eventually worked as clients or confidants. Leon Black's another good example. Like we could
Well,
keep
Ofer,
referring
just
names.
to, just to kind of a little bit, combat that. Look, Jeffrey
Yeah.
Epstein was one of the most famous people in the world. He
Within those
had connections
circles.
to everything. So it's not no surprise that, billionaires were associated with him. Obviously, he's like a billionaire himself. So, you know, just in association doesn't mean
Absolutely, yeah.
so people have to understand there's two sides to this, I think, and it's very interesting. I wanted to ask you, do you think that there's anyone specific right now in power that may have associations with Jeffrey Epstein that
Yeah.
Trump is trying to protect?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I can't be 100% sure. I don't want to say anything that's
Obviously.
potentially libelous. So that goes for anything I said before as well.
Yeah, I
But
mean, me too. So yeah,
let's say, first of all, Trump himself was very close friends with Epstein for over 15 years, actually, which is not surprising because they were both from New York in the enterprises associated with fashion because Trump owned a lot of those magnates, and
yeah,
Trump was also big in real estate, so they bonded over that. So they were very good friends, actually best friends at a certain point. Epstein said as much in 2019 before he allegedly killed himself. So that's a very obvious connection. And there have been a lot of accusations. We had the Wall Street Journal article talking about the
oh my
Bible.
God, that was ridiculous.
And
Yeah.
look, I'm not sure. There are a lot of people that are arguing that he didn't doodle, he never uses the word enigma. So, like, that's the argument we're having. But it sort of
Who uses
distracts.
the word enigma?
I do for one, but yeah, I
Okay.
don't know about Trump.
So you wrote that letter?
No, and you see, that's the issue. We'll never know for sure, and there's so much bad blood between the mainstream media that's already
Yeah.
published so many false stories that there's not going to be credibility for this story, even if it is true. And even if it was true, it's not enough to go out and say that he was actually involved in really scandalous crimes. But obviously, we should be asking more questions about it because they were so close up until 2002 when Epstein actually had accusations and allegations levied against him of harassment towards people that were employed by Trump. And that
Yeah.
apparently angered Trump, and that's why he kicked him out in the first place. So that's one consideration. Bill Clinton's another one. RFK Jr. was on the Lolita Express, but
Oh
he
yeah.
denies any like other more insidious connections.
Which also makes sense. He's a, himself, he's a rich guy, rich,
Yeah, yeah.
like it makes sense why he would be there. Also, just to add on to the point about Donald Trump, I mean, personally, right as of now, there's no real evidence that he has ever had any ties with any of the illegal things that Jeffrey Epstein was doing. And
Yeah,
I personally, my personal belief is that he doesn't. I think he's a very genuine guy. I don't think he would. However, it's important for the American public to see that. it's so we should be able to see that. And in general, the reason why the conservative base, as you explained so diligently, the reason why the conservative base cares about this is because Trump ran on a platform of ending the deep state and draining the swamp.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is the complete opposite of ending the deep state. This
Yeah.
is taking a file, which obviously the American public cares about, and basically saying that, okay, no one can look at this other than me. And that's the exact definition of what big government is. We
Yeah.
don't want that. And Tucker Carlson, he said that he doesn't want it, and really the whole conservative base doesn't want it. So I think that's why it's so big. But I wanted to transition a little bit
Yeah.
into something that the Trump administration did that is actually draining the swamp and ending the deep state, and that is releasing the Obama files from the Mueller report and all of that, you know,
Very
Russia
exciting.
collusion conspiracy. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there are two separate files that were released.
yeah,
One was a comprehensive one, over 100 pages, I believe, going through the emails and correspondence between dozens of intelligence agents and agencies talking about Russian collusion with the Trump administration, Russian potential interference in the 2016 election,
yeah,
and the way in which they very slyly changed wording and changed facts of the matter to make Trump look worse. So
yeah,
that's
guys.
one
I,
thing
I
I would
just
say.
want to say that Oprah and I actually took a read of that entire document yesterday. It was the funniest thing in the world. I
Yeah,
mean, I highly suggest it. I have several articles coming out regarding it very soon, so I highly
I'm
suggest
excited.
it. Yeah, it's the funniest document you ever read.
Yeah.
And continue. Yeah,
And then the other document is sort of more summarized. It's 11 pages and it goes through the memos that were sent that are very important for the timeline. So just to explain it for a little bit, it really begins in 2015 when Trump announced his campaign, because that's when we had the first hacking efforts. Allegedly, this is what the
yeah,
Mueller report says. They say that there were Russian attempts at hacking into the DNC and DCCC. So that started in 2015 into 2016. The allegations against Trump started around June. So we had something called the Steele dossier, which was written by, I believe his name is Christopher Steele. He was previously an MI6 agent
yeah,
and he worked for this sort of intelligence research company. He was hired by Republicans that hated Trump to find opposition research, and then he was hired by Democrats to find dirt on Trump. He got the dossier, he compiled information saying that Trump was being cultivated by the Russians as an intelligence asset for them and to try to basically help their national interests. He claimed that there were scandalous videos of Trump from 2013 that were used as blackmail and that Trump was in cahoots basically with these Russian oligarchs. This was given to the FBI. And the thing that's so scandalous is that the FBI, in their own internal documents, they said that there was no basis for much of those facts. And the very few facts that were found to be true in the document were not independently found by Steele. It was found beforehand, and then he just took it from other sources. So, despite that fact, and it was over many months that they knew this, in December of 2016, they used the Steele dossier as basically a justification for altering information that was published to the president and to the public, accusing Russia of really trying to change favor in the election to try to help get Trump to win. So
yeah.
it's very scandalous, and I hope you can sort of expound on it and explain how this is so insidious.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with the amount of I don't want to say corruption. It's not corruption,
Yeah,
but the amount of blatant deceptiveness in the Obama administration. Robert Mueller, who was what in his report was released in 2019, I believe.
yeah,
Um,
April.
he got $32 million to conduct his investigation. That's $32 million going away from taxpayer funding
Yeah,
and going straight into this special department of internal reporting in the DOJ. And, that money would have never been spent if Obama just admitted that there's no basis, like the FBI said. So that is just straight treason to our country. When you're stealing $32 million from taxpayers, I would, if I did
yeah,
that, I would be in jail for, I don't know, my entire life. But when Obama does that,
yeah,
no liberal media outlet is reporting on it. So that's what I
absolutely.
find. crazy about this. Not only that, but I find crazy about the point that still in the 2020 election, Pew Research Center, they held a poll, and 62% of Americans still believed that Russia had influence in the 2016 election. 62%. I mean, can you believe that? So, he not only changed the outcomes. Obama not only changed the outcomes of the 2016 election with this, document, but also the 2020 election. And when 62% of the
Yeah.
country believes that Russia had influence in an election, yes, some people are going to sway their votes because of it.
Yeah,
And you can say that the 2020 election was rigged. You can say that it was fair. I don't care. But this is obviously a factor that proves that what Trump was given in the 2020 election by the media, by the Obama administration, what he had to face was not fair. No other candidate had to face that.
absolutely.
So, Obama not only stole millions from taxpayers, but he also changed the outcome of elections. Any any person who would ever do anything like this would be arrested for their entire life and put to jail. So, look, I'm not calling on Obama to be arrested, but I'm calling for proper consequences to take at place. And I'm definitely calling on outlets like the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC to report on this because they're not.
It's incredible that they're not reporting on it. And if you're the first one to publish like a legitimate story outside of, Fox News, I don't know, then
It's
that's gonna
probably
be
going to be
crazy.
Fox News over.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
out of this taking this.
yeah. So besides Obama, there's so many other people implicated in the story
Yeah.
because initially they were going to write their presidential daily briefing to Obama, basically outlining the findings of whether or not Russia had significant sway in the election. And what they said is that most likely Russia did not try or even succeed in doing any sort of cyber attack that was aimed at influencing the vote counts. They may have, and this is not even confirmed, tried to access voters' data during the election, but that could have been a third party, not even Russia. And they did claim with a low degree of confidence that Russia hacked into the DNC and then used WikiLeaks as a proxy.
Which is no different from any other election taking place. Russia has done
Yeah,
those
yeah,
things in 2000, the 2000 election, the
mhm,
2004 election, every other election, and even
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, in primaries. So this is not anything new. Something else I want to, point out is that China was actually clear. They said that China had no basis in the election, which is fine. But what China does do is China does influence US elections. It's obvious now with their bots online and everything, whether it's the 2024 election or not. So the reason I'm bringing it up is not because I think China is change sway the election. I don't believe that. But I think China and co other countries like Russia, for example, they have stakes in the election and they take action to sway the results in whatever the way they do. This is normal for any election. It's not new. So the fact that you're focusing on this tiny, tiny event that may have happened in the 2016 election, it brings up nothing. It's pointless.
yeah,
So it's really it shows that the Democrats are bigoted because look at what they did in 2020, which was horrible. I mean, what I personally criticized Trump a lot for his reaction to the 2020 election. I don't think it was right. I also think that January 6th, I don't believe it was a total threat to our democracy, but I don't think it was good at all. I think Ofer agrees with me. It was not a good event that occurred there.
yeah, I do.
Um, and but when we say that's a threat to democracy, and we say that stealing $32 million from taxpayers and changing the results of two elections, when we say that is not a threat to democracy, and when we don't
Yeah,
even report on it, then what are we doing here? I'm not
absolutely.
understanding the disconnect. So, you know, I wanted to hear your final thoughts, and then we'll move on to something else.
Yeah, sure. So just to finish off, I do hope that Tulsi Gabbard continues to investigate and look specifically at the personalities like McCabe, deputy director of the FBI at the time,
Yeah.
or Comey, the director of the FBI, and the ways in which they swayed their organization to tamper with the wording, to try to make it look as if the Russians had more involvement than they actually did, and then leaked to the media that information,
Oh,
even
that's the best part.
yeah,
Yeah.
to Washington Post and NBC, and that's just proof that you are much better as an aggregator than those journalists that are very partisan minded and were able to take
Yeah.
things for a fact.
And look, I think I don't even blame the Washington Post in this case because if you get leaked information from the FBI, I would believe it. Like I would be publishing as a journalist. But the thing is that these outlets are not reporting on it now. Why are they not fixing? Like, this is
Yeah.
defamation to the extent that anything is defamation. You know, we saw that, um, what's her name? Trump's accuser of sexual
Eugene
assault.
Carroll. Eugene Carroll.
Jean Carroll,
Yeah.
she sued Trump for defamation for what was it, like $50 million or something? And she won. And that case, I read the entire thing. It was
Complete
completely
bogus. Yeah.
court. Yeah, it was a kangaroo court. Just to go into it slightly. Her main accusation was that Donald Trump assaulted her in a department store in public. So in a dressing room. So I mean, when one of the most famous people in New York City goes into a department store and assaults someone, I would think people would see it. I mean, I don't know about you, Ofer. Maybe he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, I maybe you see a 6'4" guy whose name is Donald Trump enter a department store. I would be taking a picture with him. I don't know, maybe other people wouldn't. But, it was a bogus, obviously, trial, and everything
Yeah.
about this was horrible. But she sued Trump for $50 million. If Trump tries to sue these liberal outlets, there's a big chance that the liberal outlets will not be paying anything. So, my concern is that we have this situation where media, like the Washington Post, the New York Times, they're considered some of the most highly regarded, credible sources in the United States. But the American public needs to understand that when you are defaming a president in such a way that they did just in this one case, they should be held accountable. And I don't know if they will. I don't have confidence that they will.
hmm Look, they did it with CBS when they edited the Kamala Harris interview, and I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy that Steve Colbert's show got canceled as well. So, it's gonna have to
That's the
be
Jimmy
done.
Fallon.
Yeah. Nobody's sad about that. Nobody's crying about the cancellation.
They lost what, $40 million a year for that show? I
That's
mean,
insane because
yeah.
one host is getting 50% of the funding. He doesn't
Yeah.
deserve it. He doesn't
I
need
mean,
200 employees
look,
for
he's
something that
gonna
we're
turn
doing with
into
two people.
his next position is gonna be on The View. So,
Yeah,
so,
he fits
uh,
in. He slots in.
yeah, I'd like to see that. He'll be with whatever the former press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, or whatever her name is. He'll be on it with there
Yeah.
and Oprah. But yeah, I mean, this I think is one of the biggest stories that has been released under the Trump administration. Obviously, no one's paying attention to it, but I am excited to see Tulsi Gabbard taking more action. Finally, I want her to release more files. She's clearly a wonderful pick for her position, one of the most, brightest individuals in the Trump administration. So I'm very excited to see what she's going to bring in the next 3 years.
Yeah, certainly in her position in the DNI. So far, she's done a pretty good job
Yeah.
with intelligence collection when it comes to Trump's foreign policy, giving Trump administration everything he needs to properly take into consideration the next steps. And yeah, this is a really good move for transparency. We haven't seen this before. I can't recall this happening when the Obama administration was in
Yeah.
power, whether they leaked information
Even
from the
in the first Trump
administration.
administration, even
Yeah,
in
not
the first,
even the first Trump administration, we never saw this level of transparency because there were so many scandals from the Bush administration that theoretically Obama could have leaked out that information that never came into fruition, that we never heard about in the
and
public.
Clinton,
Yeah,
remember him? He's always a player here. It's funny, you can connect Clinton with every single story we talked about today. So, Jeffrey
yeah,
Epstein. And, I want to transition a little bit though. I want to go back to our original topic, which was the Turning Point USA conference.
sure, yeah,
So there, we saw a debate between Josh Hammer, who is personally one of my mentors. He is one of the brightest individuals I've ever met in my life. I respect him dearly, and I know Ofer does too. And Dave Smith, who's also a very bright individual.
yeah.
Um, we saw a debate between them on the current situation in Gaza and between Israel and Hamas. I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Were there any moments that stuck out to you directly when you were watching that debate?
Well, the thing that was most highlighted is the line from Hammer where he sort of goes through all the posts that Dave Smith made, talking about how Trump has to be impeached because he didn't pass a war powers resolution that gave authorization to bomb Iran. That was a very big moment because he's essentially saying that Dave Smith is sort of using the MAGA base, MAGA following to sort of build up his credibility. But then he really turned on him in a way that's pretty egregious,
I
calling for him
agree.
getting impeached. And he used a lot of expletives against Trump as well. But that's not really like the soundest argument. It's just the thing that sounds
It's a
most
personal
viable.
attack. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
yeah.
Like he could argue that on its merits, and maybe it's correct. So either way, yeah, it was pretty interesting to hear that. And Dave Smith, he comes from a libertarian perspective, so he cares a lot about the constitutionality of these sort of efforts. But I would just say that it's been so eroded over time that there are no standards anymore when it comes to foreign interventions. We saw the Obama administration drone striking Yemen consistently. We saw the Biden administration expand strikes in Syria,
Yeah, I mean,
Iraq.
this is
Like, yeah, nobody's clean in that regard.
I even, I spoke with a Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate from Alabama. Even he didn't accuse Trump of doing something that wasn't constitutional. I mean, it's obvious that as president, you already have the power to,
Yeah,
take imminent action when it's necessary. And this was the exact definition of that. So saying that it wasn't constitutional, saying that you had to go through Congress, in my books, that's all BS. I really
yeah,
don't. I don't see that. But there were other points where I actually wanted to bring up that I thought was interesting in debate.
sure.
Number one, I just want to start off by saying Josh Hammer started the debate off on a bad note because he started off the debate with, personally attacking Dave Smith. If we want to have a debate, we shouldn't be personally attacking. We should have a debate where, we're debating the issue. Um, that's the only bad move I actually think Josh Hammer did. However, later in the debate, APAC becomes a big part of the conversation,
Yeah,
and whether APAC should be registered as a foreign lobby group or a foreign, organization. And Josh Hammer brought up a good point. There's thousands of groups out there that are foreign that are lobbying for members of Congress, and they're not registered as a foreign group. And, Dave Smith obviously said all of them should be registered as a foreign group. But
yeah,
my issue with that is, why are we then just focusing on APAC? Because there's a clear focus just on APAC. And I don't like APAC personally,
yeah.
but still, there's a clear focus just on APAC rather than all of the other foreign lobby groups. So, Ofer, I don't know if you wanted to answer that or if you wanted to go into that, but why is there
Sure.
a specific focus?
Yeah, I can explain why. First of all, Israel's in the news right now the most. There's an active war going on in Gaza. At the
Of
time,
course.
it was just after the war in Iran. Clashes in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, the list goes on. So the focus right now is on Israel in the way in which the United States has generally been supportive of Israel's war efforts, passing last year, actually, during the Biden administration, another package amounting to $23 billion in foreign
Yeah.
military aid for Israel. And you look at members of Congress, specifically in the House, that's really where it's most prominent. And Thomas Massie, he's a representative, he's talked about this a lot, how in each district there's an individual that represents APAC. And whenever they notice that there is a candidate that's probably going to win, they make contact with that candidate and they try to get them on the email list and try to get them in close communication with APAC. And then they send them sort of talking points that they need to repeat and try to lobby them on certain issues related to military aid and strengthening the connection with Israel. So even though APAC, when you compare it to other lobby groups that are not foreign, talking about like big pharma or
Yeah.
agriculture, those are much larger in terms of money spent. It is true that when you look at the foreign lobbies, APAC is the largest one that is lobbying politicians, and it's the one that has the most connections across party aisles because most Republicans and most Democrats outside of the squad are in close connection with APAC. And it's not just APAC, it's the entire network associated with supporting the US Israel relationship.
Yeah. And look, I think what APAC does, like I'm personally I don't support it, but they're definitely one of the better organizations when it comes to foreign lobby groups. APAC does donate to candidates who openly support Israel, but they also donate to people like Chuck Schumer who openly supports Israel, but his legislation is anything but supporting Israel. But it could be worse. We could have, instead of Chuck Schumer, we could have Mamdani in Congress. So we never know. So I like to APAC. Personally, again, I'm not a supporter, but I wouldn't rally against it because I think what they do is in some sort of way beneficial for our country. But, lastly, I want to bring up just, one more thing, and that's the Mamdani election. Obviously, Ofer, you're very well versed in it. I am too. I'm actually going to be speaking at a rally next week.
Amazing.
With Curtis Sliwa, and we're going to be discussing. how Mamdani will ruin our city. And I discuss a lot
Yeah,
about Mamdani's education policy, anti-Semitism, socialist policy, and
yeah.
everything. But I wanted to hear from Ofer. What do you think is the biggest issue from Mamdani coming from, an outside perspective? And, just to clear up, he is from Israel. So
Yeah, I live in Israel currently, but I
yeah, but he's
did
a
live
citizen.
most of my life in New York, and I was born in New York City.
Where do your, just to clear it up, where do your values align with Israel or with the United States?
Well, the United States, but that's why
Okay.
I'm talking about the
So
United States on the
yeah,
podcast.
just wanted to make sure, wanted to clear that up if any Dave Smiths wanted to watch this. So he
I'd love
aligns
to
with,
talk to him, by the way.
I would love to
Would.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very, very popular, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he's
huge.
huge on Twitter and everything. So, yeah, so I wanted to get your thoughts on Mamdani.
Sure. So I mimic what Tucker Carlson said about the fact that he's resonating with younger voters, people that received college degrees and are not able to utilize them properly because they've been priced out of the markets. There aren't job opportunities in the fields that they got into, and now they're renting an apartment and getting support from their parents. So it's not the worst situation for them. But yeah, I understand why they are disaffected with the situation compared to boomers who, they have some sort of security with where they're at right now, and they preferred Cuomo. So I understand the concerns, but I do think that they're very misguided in the way that he's going about the policies. I believe that there's no way to control the outflow of high income earners. So when people that are making above 500,000 a year, above a million a year, are going to get threatened by tax hikes or increases in regulation or otherwise, people that are running real estate companies, running grocery stores, whatever it may be, when they sense that there's going to be a threat to their bottom line, you can't do anything about them moving out. So you have to find a way to really incentivize them staying. And he's talking about tourism as if that's going to like offset a massive decrease in revenue to the city. So that's going to be good for Florida. It's going to be good for Miami and
Oh, I
Texas.
can't wait.
Yeah, yeah. But when you lose a huge chunk of your revenue, and it might not happen if Mamdani is unable to advance his agenda, and maybe it was all just talk, and then his base is going to be very disappointed. But if he does go through with it, then it's going to be disastrous for the revenue, and then there's going to be no way to pay for public education. For right now in New York City, they're subsidizing daycare and pre-K and childcare. How are they going to pay for that? I have no idea.
Yeah, Ofer, you bring up a wonderful point, and just to tell you, this is unfortunate, but I don't believe it's just old talk. If we look at his legislative agenda when he was an assemblyman in New York, which he still is, I actually uncovered a lot
Yeah.
about that. He co-authored a budget which spent $20 million on DEI hiring in New York City. For reference, the current population of New York teachers who are Black is 42%, and African Americans make up 22% of the entire city population. So, maybe there is a diversity there that needed. Maybe there needs to be more white people. I don't know. But
Maybe.
your DEI hiring, whatever, $20 million in taxpayer funds is not worth it. Not only that, he spent about $1 million in funding an Adirondack Museum for African Americans,
Oh
just
my
for
God.
the population of African Americans in the Adirondacks throughout time was consistently always below 2%. So I again don't know
Yeah.
who's going to visit that museum, but have fun. And there's this obvious issue of Mamdani spending money where it shouldn't be spent. And he is a rich kid who came into this city from a palace in Uganda or wherever.
Yeah.
So I'm quoting his mother, by the way. His mother literally said his house was a palace. So I mean, I wanted to hear your final thoughts on, what will he do to this city? What is the worst possible thing he can do to it?
Yeah, sure. Raising the basically income tax on higher earners, really increasing the sort of red tape that is already egregious within the Department of Building in New York
Yeah.
City that makes it so difficult for developers to build, and zoning laws as well. Zoning laws are so difficult because they're basically stymieing the opportunity to build new properties, new condos, and that will bring down the cost of rent. And then he's talking about rent stabilizers as well. That's going to be so dangerous because then good luck buying a new property that's going to be built by
Yeah.
whoever's left. So all of that confounded together is just absolutely egregious. And I really hope that the state legislature, the city assembly is going to make it impossible for him to advance that agenda. And
And
maybe
it's
he
on the majority.
realizes, maybe he realizes himself when he implements it that people are going to move out. There's going to be flights to Florida and Texas, and then
Yeah.
he'll have no choice. I really hope that's the case.
I do too, but look at the city assembly right now. We have people worse than Mamdani being in that assembly. It's terrible. I have no hope for the city if he gets elected, to be honest. I'm gonna do everything possible, and we're gonna do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen, but
Yeah,
it's not looking good. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful podcast.
yeah.
I'm so happy we finally got this started, and this is a wonderful first episode. So, the Patriot perspective, we are here to stay.
Yes, absolutely. I thought that it flowed very well, and it's only going to get better from now as we get slated a list of people to interview. So that's going to be
Yeah,
exciting.
guys, stay tuned. We have some big names coming, so
Yeah.
stay tuned.